we will control the vertical.
Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I'm covering a show called Nightmare Classics, which is also known as Shelley Duvall's Nightmare Classics. It's a horror anthology series based on classic tales produced by Shelley Duvall. Now, she'd already had some success in this area, producing tales for sort of children and young teens with two sets of previous anthology series. Fairy Tale Theatre, which was sort of classic tales from Hans Christian Andersen, things like that, and Tall Tales and Legends, which had more of a bent towards things like American stories like Legends of the Sleepy Hollow, things like that. As I say, those first two series, which I intend to get to, they're new on my radar really from just sort of doing research for this particular show. I'll cover those at some point. Anyway, so Shelley Duvall went on to produce this series, Nightmare Classics, where the target was more older teenager and adult audience, and it focused on, as I say, more classic tales. Victoria sort of horror tales seemed to be the focus for this one. This wasn't successful and only ran for 4 episodes between August and November of 1989. It was planned as a 6-episode run, but only 4 were produced, and it wasn't entirely successful. The 4 stories it covered, as I say, all Victorian, are Turn of the Screw, which is the one we'll be discussing in this episode, by Henry James, Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, and The Eyes of the Panther by Ambrose Bierce. So, interesting set of stories. Turn of the Screw is what we'll be looking at now. Now, in terms of IMDb, Turn of the Screw does appear to be the lowest rated of the 4 tales. The others are in the 6s, 6.1 upwards. This one was only rated 4.3, so it isn't considered by the voting audience. And let me see, there's 73 people voted on this, which is a fair sample. 4.3, so not great. Now, this one, as I say, is Henry James. It from 1898. It was actually first produced. It's kind of a famous tale in that it's been done in film form a few times. The most famous one probably being The Innocents, which is quite a great horror film actually, if you've seen it. But it involves a governess being sort of procured by an uncle who's responsible for these 2 children. I think she's kind of fascinated by the uncle, but she goes and looks after the children. But the children sort of start acting inappropriately. Their behaviour plus certain visions and sort of feelings the woman gets kind of adds to the tale. In this particular story, which runs to nearly an hour, it was Amy Irving was the governess in question. And she's doing an English accent. They're all doing an English accent, and she's not bad. She's not bad. She's not given a name in this. It's just the governess. She meets up with the uncle, played by David Hemmings, the sort of British actor. He's reasonably old at this point, middle-aged certainly, as the uncle, who's kind of a bit wayward. You know, he enjoys his pleasures, let's put it that way, and she kind of likes him, but she's kind of hiding it. She goes to she takes up her charges, who are Miles and Flora, a young girl and a slightly older boy. Now, in the original story, I think the boy's about more like 13, but in this, Balthazar Getty, I think, is presented as 15 and quite a bit older than Flora. Flora's, I'd say 10, something like that. And they're the main actors involved, apart from the housekeeper, who is Mrs. Gross, who is, I don't know, there's like a Irish accent, but it doesn't sound quite right. Amy Irving accent's very, very clearly enunciated. But it's not bad as an English accent, not bad at all. And Amy Irving's quite charismatic, so that kind of works. Unfortunately, the presentation here wasn't great. It was a little flat. It didn't quite work. I can see why it rates low, and I understand some of the other ones rate much higher, but I think this one may have been the one that sort of stalled the series anyway. I'm guessing a lot of people tuned in for this one, didn't really like it and didn't go on, but those that did go on did actually like it. I got a feeling it's like that. It's got some differences from both the written book and some of the filmic versions, certainly around the end. But I kind of like some elements of it. I don't think there was anything wrong particularly with the acting. I just think it was it lacked menace. The direction was kind of flat. The tension wasn't built up very well. There was a little with music and stuff like that. And I kind of like the fact that sometimes when the children talking, you could hear the voice of someone else, which sort of precluded a kind of either a possession or controlling element, which is strong in the story anyway. Balthazar is not too bad as the boy kept becoming to be a man, and some of his dialogue's kind of interesting. I liked some of it. So there were bits of this I did like, but I can't have to say, based on this episode, I can't recommend this very strongly. I will go on at some point and cover Carmilla and so on. So I'll give it another go. And it's interesting the casting on this. As I say, David Hemmings and Amy Irving's not bad casting at all. And if I look at some of the later episodes, we've got people like Roy Dotrice, Roddy McDowall. Roddy McDowall's a stalwart of Anthology TV, obviously. Meg Tilly, that sounds interesting. C. Thomas Howe and Daphne Zuniga, who are very rising stars in the 80s, so that's kind of interesting as well. So there's some decent stuff going on. Anthony Andrews is in one. Laura Dern, it must be an early turn. Laura Dern and Rue McClanahan from the Golden Girls in the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde one. So that's got my interest, I have to say. That's got my interest. But I didn't mind this. And I don't think any of the actors are to blame for this. I think Amy Irving gave a solid turn here, but it didn't quite hang together. I did kind of like they had a slightly different twist at the end from the usual story. A slightly darker twist than you'd expect. So I kind of like that. In many ways, it reminded me a little. The vibe is kind of very similar to something like The Woman in Black. It's kind of got that kind of vibe. As I say, this wasn't entirely successful. So, Nightmare Classics. It is on YouTube. You can go find Nightmare Classics. If you look on YouTube, Nightmare Classics, Turn of the Screw, you will find this one. It runs, I think, to something like 57 minutes, something like that. So, if you think you might be interested, go have a look. And indeed, the rest of the series are on YouTube too. Okay then. Okay, that's it for me. May I ask, is anybody out there?
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to